September 16th, 2017. Okay, and we can start. So we begin with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so now after quite a long interval of the classes on the Anguttara Nikaya, I think we broke off sometime in July, so now we're ready to resume and to wind up and complete the section on the ones. And so, since it's been a long interval since we were going through these suttas, and the suttas that we've been going through all conform to a particular template. So just to go back to the first sutta within this series, and then it will show us the formulation that's used for each of the subsequent suttas. Okay, so the basic pattern here is, if for just the time of a finger snap, a bhikkhu, a monk, develops so-and-so, in this case the first jhana, he is called a bhikkhu who is not devoid of jhana. Here I think in the second place, the word jhana has basically the meaning of meditation rather than a particular meditative absorption. Of course, in the case of the first jhana, it will be a meditative absorption. But as we see, as we go through, that there are some of the meditation topics pertain more to the state or to the side of insight rather than concentration. And yet when one is developing insight in that particular mode, you can say that you're in a jhana, the first jhana, second, third, fourth jhana, but it's still, one is not devoid of jhana in the broader sense of meditation. I might have explained that the word jhana is from the verb jayati, which means to meditate. And so in a general sense, the word jhana will mean meditation, but then the Buddha used that word in a more specific sense to signify a particular group or set of meditative attainments, which are called the four jhanas. Okay, so he is called a monk who is not devoid of jhana as meditation, who acts upon the teaching of the teacher is the Buddha, who responds to the Buddha's advice, and who does not eat the country's alms food in vain. That's because one is, as a monastic, one receives offerings of alms food from the people, and to make oneself worthy of that, excuse me, to make oneself worthy of those offerings, one has to be diligent in one's practice. Okay. I don't think I'm going to sneeze this many times. Excuse me?
It's allergy season.
I don't have an allergy. It must be a sudden, fluctuation or change in the temperature. Or maybe I do have an allergy then. Okay, so this pattern is applied to the four jhanas or meditative absorptions. Then it's applied to the four divine abodes or the immeasurable states: loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, equanimity. Then it's applied to the basically the 7 sets that make up the 37 aids to enlightenment, the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 4 right efforts, the 4 bases for psychic potency, the 5 spiritual faculties, the 5 spiritual powers, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and the 8 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. So that is what we've covered already. And now we come to a very difficult series of terms, or series of practices, or practices and attainments, which seem to be the way the Buddha had adapted and absorbed the practices that had been transmitted within what we call the yogic tradition of his time. Before his enlightenment, when the Buddha was still a seeker of enlightenment, a bodhisattva, he went to learn and practice under several teachers of yogic-style meditation. And within each of those systems, he had reached the highest attainment possible in those systems. And yet the texts that have come down don't tell us what the actual practices were that culminated in those attainments. We learn, for example, in Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 26, that the Buddha first, he practiced under a teacher called Alara Kalama, and under Alara, he learned the practice that culminated in the 3rd formless meditation called the base of nothingness. But what practices he undertook to reach the base of nothingness, the texts don't tell us. And then when he left Alara, then he went to another teacher called Uddaka Ramaputta. And under Uddaka, then he learned practices that led to the 4th formless meditation, and that is called the sphere or base of neither perception nor non-perception. Again, we're told that the Bodhisattva reached that attainment, but what the practice was that led to that attainment, the practice or practices, the texts don't say a word. And so it seems to me, just as a conjecture, that in these sections that we're going to come to now, we have those practices that had been circulating amongst the different yogic schools, not the kind of modern hatha yoga, but the meditative yoga, the forerunners of what came to be called Raja Yoga or Ashtanga Yoga. And so it seems that the Buddha absorbed those practices because they could be used as a means of developing and perfecting samadhi. So he absorbed them into his own system. And nowadays, these particular practices or formulations, to my knowledge, they've almost completely fallen into neglect. When the commentary gives some explanation of them, whether the commentary is correct or not, I can't say. Okay, but I find it easier, as I said in the notes announcing the class, rather than start with the first group, to go in reverse order, starting with the 10 Cocinas, because the 10 Cocinas, or at least some of them, are used in the forest monasteries of Southeast Asia. So these are called, it starts with the 4 Cocinas representing Four Cocinas representing the 4 primary elements. Then 4 colored cocinas. This is terrible. I didn't have anything like this before. I wonder whether there's dust floating around. I do have a mild allergy to dust. Okay, so we have 4 element cocinas, 4 colored cocinas, and then 2 other cocinas are added, which are called the space cocina and the consciousness cocina. Now there's a standard formula for the cocinas. That we find coming down in the text. Yeah, here these are called the 10 Cocina bases. The actual full expression is Cocina. The word Cocina, it's conjectured that the original meaning is something like universality. What is the Chinese expression for that? Bien, and base is Ju. Se bien Ju. Could that be it? Se bien Ju. So bien means pervading, and the chu is a base. So this is the she bien ju. So pervading or universal. So that's the literal meaning of the word Cocina. But it's being used in such a specific sense that to say the 10 universals would really make almost no sense at all. So we always use the word untranslated. So it's the 10 Cocina bases. And so here, the way it's explained by this formula, so we have one person perceives the earth Cocina above, below, across, non-dual, measureless. Okay, so in this is the stage of the actual meditative attainment where one is seeing earth pervading all directions, so all encompassing, so it's extending everywhere, above, below, across, without any distinctions, immeasurable. The perception is that of the earth. And then the same is applied to water, fire, air, and the colors, and so on. Okay, so how is this actually practiced? Or how is it actually developed? Okay, the Visuddhimagga, the Path of Purification in Chapter 4, it gives quite specific instructions on how one goes about developing the earth Cocina. And first one has to use, unless one is extremely skilled through past lives practice of this type of meditation, one has to use a physical device to construct a physical device. And the way this is done, one would take like a strip of wood of flexible wood in order to create a rim. So it's a flexible wood that one could bind around, wrap around to create a circle. And then, of course, one will attach the two ends so that one has a circle, well, something like this clock, except generally it should be, I would say, about 8 to 10 inches in diameter. And then within that circular rim created by the strip of wood, one fills that space with clay, brownish clay, to represent the distinctive quality of the earth element. And now, this meditation on the Cocina is not in any way the same as the meditation on the four great elements as a kind of insight exercise into the nature of matter. But this is purely a samadhi meditation aimed at gaining concentration by using the quality, in this case, the quality of earth as the focus of attention. So it is not trying to get the earth element's quality of being hardness, solidity, or of supporting the other three elements, but rather one is just trying to get a visual impression of the earth element. And so one fills this circular disc with clay, makes it very smooth so that there are no ripples and rough portions in the surface. And then one sits in a chair and one puts that disc is now called the Earth Cocina, the physical Earth Cocina device. One puts the device a certain distance in front of one, sort of held up, that one makes a kind of stand to hold it up so that one is looking down at it at maybe an angle of about, this would be 60 degrees. Shouldn't be more acute than 45 degrees. So one is looking down and sitting in a chair, and then one just focuses upon that disc, on that quality of earthness, and one repeats to keep the mind focused on it. One can be repeating to oneself, earth, earth, earth. Or if one is using Pali, it would be like Pattavi, 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 until one starts to get a mental impression of that Earth Cocina. And one will practice from time to time closing the eyes and just focusing upon the after image of the Earth Cocina, then opening the eyes again until so that one is again seeing the earth device, then closing it, opening it, doing this over and over. And then at times one will keep the eyes closed and then try to visualize that impression of the Earth Cocina. Okay, then at a certain point, one will get what is called the learning sign. That's the way it's translated by Nyanamoli, or the acquired, maybe the acquired sign is a better rendering, the Ekaka-nipāta, where one is able to see the Earth Cocina as clearly with the eyes closed as with the eyes open. And so when one reaches that point, of course one might have to reinforce it. It's not just immediately after getting that acquired sign that one puts the earth device away. But one goes on practicing in this way for some time until one can retain a fairly stable impression of the Earth Cocina, until one can retain the acquired sign or the acquired image in the mind. And at that point, then one doesn't require the physical device anymore. That one shouldn't just cast it away, but keep it in storage in case one has to return to it in order to rejuvenate one's practice. But now at this point, when one has the acquired image of the Earth Cocina, then one just goes on focusing upon the acquired image. And then it's said that at a certain point, out of the acquired image, there emerges something which is called, Nyanamoli translate this as the counterpart sign, or the counterpart image. In Pali, this is the Patibhaga-nimitta. So the acquired sign, I'll write this. Okay, the acquired sign is Ugaha-nimitta, sort of the base of that word is the verb ganhati, which means to grasp, to take, and then the prefix ut gives the sense of up. So this is the sign that's taken up, that's sort of grasped by the mind. And so that is the mental image of the physical device when the mental image is very clear and vivid. But it's said that the acquired sign still retains sort of the faults of the original physical device. Like if there are little variations in color in the physical device or a little roughness on the surface, that appears in the acquired sign. But once the acquired sign has become stable enough, then one can discard the physical device and one just focuses upon the acquired sign, sort of striking at it with the mind again and again and bringing the mind back repeatedly until at a certain point it said, out of the acquired sign, the other sign emerges called the Patibhaga-nimitta, the counterpart sign. And to illustrate the difference between the two signs, the text of Visuddhimagga uses the simile that the Ugaha-nimitta, the acquired sign, is like seeing the full moon when there's a layer of cloud. Not a thick cloud, but a thin layer of cloud, so that you could see the image of the moon, but it's not bright and radiant. But then when a wind blows the clouds away, and then you're seeing the full moon in a cloudless sky, that is like the emergence of the counterpart sign out of the acquired sign. And the arising, it said that with the arising of the counterpart sign, then the 5 hindrances completely subside, and then the mind becomes concentrated with access concentration. Access concentration or neighborhood concentration This is upachara samadhi. So the word upachara, it's the vicinity of, the approach to. So when we're coming into the library, when we get past the door, there's a little vestibule where we take off the shoes and where there are bulletin boards. We could say that is the upachara of the library. And then when we come in through the second set of doors and up the stairs, then we're in the library. That is the full samadhi or absorption. Okay, so the first is upachara samadhi, neighborhood concentration or access concentration. In this case, based upon the Earth Cocina. And then as one goes on developing concentration, developing the access concentration, when the jhana factors become strong enough to plunge the mind completely into the object, into a state of absorption in the object, that is called appana samadhi. The word appana, or Sanskrit arpana, is fixed concentration or absorption concentration. We call it full immersion concentration. And that is equivalent to the jhanas. Okay, so initially, the sign or image that appears as the object of the jhana will be somewhat limited in size. Like it will be, I guess in the visual, it will just occupy a central portion of the visual field, the mentally visualized field. But then, after one acquires skill in the jhana based on the Earth Cocina image, one can take that image and start extending it or expanding it so that one extends the range of the earth wider and wider and wider until the entire inwardly visualized field is completely covered by the impression of earth. And that is the universalization of the Earth Cocina. So that is what is being described here as one person perceives the Earth Cocina above, below, across, non-dual, and measureless. Okay, then the water cocina. The preliminary device for the water cocina would be a bowl of water, clear water, pure water. Again, that one will place in front of one and then sit and just focus on that water, just trying to absorb or immerse the mind in that distinctive quality of the water. So one will focus upon it as water, 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 until one can get the mental impression of water. And then when one gets the mental impression, the acquired image, then one could put the bowl of water aside and then just focus upon the mental image of water. Then the fire cocina, I a little hesitant to recommend this. Don't try it at home. There must be, I don't know people who have practiced the fire cocina, but the way I think it would be done, you would need like a special kind of cell for this, in which one will start a fire And then one will have in front of the burning fire, it has to be a controlled fire, one will have a plank of wood or kind of a panel, a wooden panel with a circle cut out in front of the fire, so that through that circle, that open circle, one could see the flames coming up and burning. And then one focuses upon those flames as fire, fire, fire. The air Cocina strikes me as the most difficult of all. I think we've discussed this at some point, where the way it has to be done, since you can't see the air, but you just have to see when the wind is blowing, things like the rustling of the leaves in the wind. But then I don't see how one is actually focusing on air. It seems that one is focusing on the changes in the position and the color of the leaves. So we'll skip the air. If we have, does anybody here ever practice the air Cocina?
Yes, the fog. I can look at the fog.
Look at fog.
Well, that's in the air.
Yeah, but that's water moisture
Right.
rather than air. Okay, so within, say, some of the Sri Lankan forest monasteries that I've been acquainted with, the Cocina meditations that are practiced, and they're not practiced that often, but some monks take them up. One would be the earth Cocina, and then the most popular would be the color Cocinas. So we have the blue Cocina, for example. What one would do, one would take a sheet of wood, a plank of wood, and then out of that plank of wood one will have a circle cut out 8 to 10 inches, and then it would be painted a bright blue. I think Kaidi's new car would make an excellent blue Cocina. Yeah, it's a very nice shade of blue for a Cocina. Okay, and then one would just focus on that blue disc as being blue, blue, blue. And then, if one prefers, one could use yellow, red, or white, whatever one's preference is. Okay, now there's a certain difference in the 10 Cocinas of the suttas and the 10 in the Visuddhimagga. You see, in the suttas, we have something called the space Cocina and the consciousness Cocina. And these are identified with the base of infinite space and the base of infinite consciousness. So in the Visuddhimagga system, the 4 formless meditations are mentioned as a separate group of meditation objects. And so these two would be taken out in the Visuddhimagga system because they are instead assigned to the the first 2 of the 4 formless meditations. And so this is why often in the commentaries, the commentaries will speak about 38 meditation objects rather than 40. So but the Visuddhimagga wants to have a set of 10 Cocinas. And so instead of these 2, what it will have, instead of just the space Cocina, it has what is called the limited space Cocina, which means that one doesn't use boundless space, but one uses a limited space. So one starts off with just a limited empty space, and then once one gets the focus on the limited space, then one extends that boundlessly, and then one gets the first formless meditation, the base of boundless space. And then the 10th Cocina, in place of the consciousness Cocina, is the light Cocina. So to do the light Cocina, one could use a candle, but not focusing on the flame of, this is where it gets very tricky. Rather than focusing on the flame of the candle, one would focus on the light aspect of the candle. Because if you focus on the flame, then it's a form of the Fire Cocina. But probably better for the Light Cocina would be something like the light of the moon, or maybe a beam of sunlight, the sunlight seen through an opening in a plank of wood. Okay, so these are the 10 cocinas. Okay, does anybody have any questions on this? Okay, Matt first.
Is each cocina related to a specific level of attainment?
Not originally. Each cocina can be used as a basis for all 4 jhanas. But like one of the skills that's said to be acquired, or one of the ways of developing skill in the practice of samadhi, is to use each cocina, let me put it this way, to go in turns connecting one cocina to one meditative attainment. So one would start off, say, using the earth cocina for the first jhana, then one would go the water cocina for the second jhana, the fire cocina for the third jhana, the air cocina for the fourth jhana, the blue cocina starting off with this and then going to the base of boundless space, the yellow cocina starting with that, then going to the base of boundless consciousness, the red starting with the red cocina, then going to the base of nothingness, the white cocina going to the base of neither perception nor non-perception, and then going back in reverse order, and then circulating them. So one would then use the water cocina for the first jhana, the fire cocina for the second jhana, the air cocina for the third, the blue cocina for the fourth, the yellow for boundless space, the red cocina for boundless consciousness, the white cocina for nothingness, and the earth cocina starting from that to the base of neither perception nor non-perception. And then it's said that one has to be able to go in and out like in a split second. And that is for developing the kind of skill that is necessary in order to exercise the supernormal powers. Because the supernormal powers require extraordinary dexterity in the attainment of samadhi and the kind of wieldiness of mind and malleability of mind with samadhi. And those are the exercises to develop that flexibility, workability, malleability of the mind.
So it's basically all 10 have to be practiced in that order.
That's only if one wants to develop that degree of flexibility and versatility in order to be able to exercise the supernormal or psychic powers. But in order to go, if you're just want to develop samadhi as a basis for insight, one doesn't have to develop that degree of skill. Then any cocina can be used without having to bring in other cocinas. Dina?
Yes, I have some easy questions.
Okay.
I don't understand, and I've always been struggling with this, the difference between cocina and nimitta. Is it
Okay.
the same, cocina and nimitta?
Okay, let us say that it's actually a trickier question than I first thought. Okay, let us say we use the word cocina device The Cocina device is the physical device that is used as the initial object of the meditation. But the word Cocina can be used to refer to the physical device as well as to the particular object itself, the visually apprehended or mentally apprehended object. And in that case, then the nimitta, if one is, say, using the earth Cocina, and then the nimitta appears, then you would say, I have the nimitta of the earth Cocina. And loosely speaking, you could say that my object is the earth Cocina, but then it means, in this case, the mentally apprehended nimitta. It's no longer the physical object.
When I was in Sri Lanka, the monks were always talking about the acquisition of the nimitta as a stage of, an elevated stage of awareness.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't quite get that. And then at the retreat, you were talking about focusing on the, when you're meditating and you're focusing on the, I don't know, the dark spot, or just trying to keep, the whole thing kind of puzzles me. Insight meditation, this,
Yeah.
nimitta, Cocina. I wish there was a way to grasp it all.
I think that maybe the distinction that I made is just sufficient.
Okay.
We could speak about, okay,
Thank
the
you.
Cocina is a particular object. So there's the earth Cocina, water Cocina, blue Cocina, red Cocina. So that is the specific object. The nimitta can be acquired from many different objects. So we would speak about the acquired image, but that acquired image can arise from any of the Cocinas. It can arise from mindfulness of breathing. It can arise from focusing on a particular part of the body.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
so
That
it's not, yeah.
very, very, very helpful.
Yeah, the nimitta is not tied to the Cocina.
And it's not a stage, it's not, is it a stage of growth in a sense? I mean, have you transcended the struggle to come back to the breath when you have that?
Yeah, when the nimitta arises, in the case of the breath, okay, anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, gives rise to its own nimitta. So you get the nimitta based on the breath. Yeah, so that's not a Cocina object. So based on the breath, you get the nimitta arises. And then it's no longer, when it's no longer in the struggle to come back to the breath, but by the time for the nimitta to arise, the mind has to be able to rest in a quite steady and stable mode on the breath for extended periods of time. Then it's that extended focus on the breath that gives rise to the nimitta.
Thank you so much. I think I finally got it.
Yeah. Okay, Stacy? And take the microphone.
So each Cocina has its own nimitta?
From each Cocina, the acquired image, the ugaha nimitta, and the counterpart image, the patibhaga nimitta, can arise, and the nimitta based on each Cocina will be different from the others. In a generic sense, each one will be the acquired image, and each will be the counterpart image, but each will have a distinct quality different from that of the others. For, say, the blue Cocina, the mental image is going to be blue. It's not going to be red. If you're practicing with the blue device, and then you get a red acquired sign, I don't know how that's possible, but it's not the acquired sign, it's not the acquired image of the blue Cocina device. if you're practicing with the blue device, and then it gives rise to its proper image, it should be a blue image. And if you're practicing with an earth Cocina, and it gives rise to its acquired sign, it should be an image that has that earthy quality, that reddish-brown, clay-like quality.
I always thought that the nimitta was just a light, like just a generalized sort of white light that appeared.
It's a luminosity, but the luminosity will have a different color to it or a different quality depending upon the original object. So the original object conditions the way the nimitta appears.
Thank you.
Just like a difference between, if you see a red light or a blue light, they're both lights, but they're different colors. Carolyn, do you? Carolyn had.
Bhante, is this on? It seems to me that the object is a distraction. Like to have to, like here's the Earth Cocina.
Yeah.
Like it seems that it would be easier and stronger to visually, mentally see that in the eye, and then hold it like that, rather than
work with a physical device?
yeah, like say it was this, like to go back and forth to something physical, to just, in my mind, if you said, let's visualize this pink thing, like to mentally hold that and hold that strong.
Maybe for somebody who has a vivid visual imagination, would be able to bring up the image of one of the Cocinas without relying on a physical device. But the texts, I think, are bearing in mind the generality of practitioners. And so it's useful, for an ordinary practitioner without that very acute visual sense to begin with the actual physical object and then continually bring the mind to bear on that physical object until that mental impression becomes strong enough that one doesn't need the physical object anymore.
Thank you.
Where is this reference coming from?
This sutta?
Yeah.
This is Anguttara Nikaya, Book of Tens, number 25.
Bhante, how do blind people practice it without the ability to see the Cocina?
They wouldn't use the Cocina.
What did you use then?
Well, they could use mindfulness of breathing, can use the 4 Brahma-vihara qualities, could use many other meditation subjects, but they just wouldn't use the Cocina because that requires a visual sense. Or if they could do insight meditation using, say, sound as the object, or the mind as the object.
But for blind people, nimitta is still possible.
I don't know. I would assume that they can get a kind of nimitta. Probably it wouldn't have. It might not be a visual impression, but it could be a nimitta, could be this felt sensation. But I just have to conjecture because I don't have experience being blind myself, and I haven't seen this point discussed in the text. And I haven't discussed with any blind person who's practiced or tried to practice Cocina meditation.
I saw a video of a blind person who was a mountain climber who used sound to sort of get a visual a sense of the space around him,
Yeah.
of the mountains and
Yeah.
the slopes of hills or wherever, and where he was. So it's possible to get a sense of your surroundings, even though you don't have a
Yeah,
visual
maybe the
impression.
surroundings, but to get, certainly the 4 color casinas are pretty much out for the blind person. Even a colorblind person? Well, maybe no, I think, but they wouldn't be able to distinguish the red and blue casino.
I
Okay,
have one really easy one.
okay. That
This
was
is the
easy.
easiest question you've ever had. Can you please tell me, what is a forest monastery as
What is-
opposed to any other kind?
What is a forest monastery?
Yes. Isn't that easy?
Yeah, it's a monastery that's located in a forest. It said that it has to be a certain distance, I don't remember the exact measurement, from a village or a town to count as forest.
But why is it special? It seems when you
Because
speak of
it's-
it, it's special and
Yeah.
different.
Because it's a quieter place, and so it's a place where you wouldn't have regular, like, religious activities going on all the time, and people just dropping in to visit and saying, I want to see so-and-so. So it's usually the monasteries that are specialized in meditation practice would be located in the forest.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. May all questions be as easy as that.
What?
I said, may all questions in the future be as easy as that. Okay, so let us return now. Okay, so we did the 10 casinas. Okay, now we can go up to, these are called the 8, there's a technical term for this, it's called the 8 Vimoka. Let me get my scratch pad. So the word vimoka comes from the verb muchyati, which means to be released, to be freed, plus the prefix vi, which is just an intensifier. And from the same verb, we also get the word vimutti. And if any of you are familiar, like with Hindu yoga systems, you hear about the state called moksha, which is liberation. It's from this same verb in Sanskrit, which would that be, I think, muchyati. So it means to be freed, to be liberated. So these are 8 liberations, or I translate them as 8 emancipations, since I use liberation for vimutti. But these states that are called the 8 emancipations are not liberation from samsara, from the cycle of birth and death. And the terms don't inherently suggest the actual eradication of the defilements, but rather these are called emancipations or liberations in the sense that the mind is temporarily liberated from certain obstructive states. And the first 3 I see to be just different, or maybe you could say particular approaches to the attainment of the 4 jhanas. So the first 3 correspond to the practices that lead to the 4 jhanas. But it's not that this one represents one level of jhana, the next one a higher level of jhana, the third one is still a higher level of jhana. But each of these can be taken as a mode or an approach to developing all 4 jhanas. Oh, okay, sorry. Is this better?
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
Can be a little bit smaller, but it's great.
Okay, as long as this is good. Okay, and the terms themselves seem to be, I have to say, rather obscure, and the commentary gives an explanation of them. And as I said when we started this talk, I'm not sure at all that the explanation and the commentary corresponds to the original meaning of these expressions. But if we don't have the commentary, we have no way of getting access to the original meaning of the expression, except maybe through personal experience, but then it becomes one's personal opinion. Okay, so the first, you could see that there is a contrast set up. One is possessing forms, one sees forms, and the second is not percipient of forms internally, one sees forms externally. So the first one seems to be saying that being percipient of forms internally, one sees forms internally. And this is the way the commentary explains it, that this is a meditator. It's going to sound rather strange. If it sounds strange to you, be aware it also sounds strange to me. The meditator is going to be developing a color cocina, and to obtain the color for the cocina, they take an object that is internal to the body. Maybe this is actually corresponds to what Carolyn was suggesting. For example, it would be like to develop and they would be developing the color cocinas in this case. So to develop the blue cocina, the meditator might take the blue of the eyes, using a mirror to see blue eyes, if one has blue eyes, and then picking up just that color blue, and then being able to develop a strong focus on that blue color. And the Indian texts, for some reason, they take blue to be the color of the hair. So the people in the Indian subcontinent, they'll actually have black hair. We would call it black. But for some reason, they consider it to be nila, blue. Okay, then for the blue cocina, the red cocina, one would take the impression of blood when blood is flowing, or sticking out the tongue in a mirror and seeing the reddish color of the tongue, or if one has seen the flesh of the body, the muscle tissue, one picks up on that red color of the muscle. Okay, so something internal to the body one picks up to get the impression of red, and then one uses that as the basis for the red cocina. So the red, blue, red, yellow. Yellow, they say, would be the color of, could be the complexion of the skin, or it can be, use your imagination, anything that's yellow in the body. And then white would be particularly the whites of the eyes. So one picks up the color that's internal to the body, and then one sees these forms internally. I guess one sees the forms within oneself. And somehow that becomes then the Cocina object. Okay, then not recipient of forms internally, one sees forms externally. So in this case, one doesn't pick up the color from something internal to the body, but one uses an external object to pick up the color. And then one develops meditation absorption based upon that colored object that originated from an external meditative support. Okay, then the third emancipation is said that one is focused only on the beautiful. And the commentary explains this to mean that one develops, or as one's meditation develops, one is able to perceive inwardly very, very beautiful colored images, colored nimittas. And then one focuses upon that in its aspect of being beautiful. Okay, so these are three means or three approaches to the four jhanas. Then with the fourth emancipation, we now go beyond the jhanic level to the level of the formless attainments. So within the jhanas, one is still focusing upon some visualized or inwardly visualized form. And say one has a blue Cocina, and now one has extended that blue Cocina, but now one wants to go beyond the fourth jhana based on the blue Cocina to reach the first formless meditative absorption. So what one does is to take that blue Cocina, the blue disk that one is inwardly perceiving, a blue sphere, and one extends that blue until it becomes all-pervading, extending through all of the inwardly visualized space. And then, at a certain point, one turns the attention away from the blueness of the object to focus only on the space occupied by the blue object. So in a sense, one mentally rolls up the blue object, leaving just the mentally visualized or mentally apprehended space. So the blue object has been all-pervading, pervading all of space. Now one pulls away or rolls up the blue object, but the blue object is now gone, but the space remains. And so now the mind is apprehending this boundless space. And so that is the absorption into the base of boundless space. To go to the next absorption, okay, in the base of boundless space, the mind is apprehending boundless space. So one will now focus on that aspect of the mind that is apprehending boundless space. And since space is boundless, that mind that's apprehending boundless space is apprehended to be boundless. And so now one has the object for the base of boundless consciousness, or the infinity of consciousness. Then to go to the third formless absorption, one focuses upon a particular aspect of that boundless consciousness, that there's no impediment or obstruction in it, that it's utterly without anything obstructive there. And so when one sort of is able to focus on that unobstructive nature of the boundless consciousness, then that becomes the object for the base of nothingness, or maybe it's better rendered non-obstructiveness, the base of non-obstruction. And then one turns to that consciousness which is aware of non-obstructiveness, and one sees that in that consciousness, the perception is so subtle that one cannot say whether it exists or does not exist. And then that becomes the base of neither perception nor non-perception. If this sounds very creates a kind of mental vertigo, don't be concerned or worried about it. Because these are this is like the super rocket science. This is no longer like sending a rocket to the moon or even to Mars or Jupiter. This is like sending one of these explorers that are going to go into other galaxies, or like the Hubble telescope, which is able to capture the light, not from other stars within the Milky Way, but this is getting the light that's coming from other galaxies to the far reaches of the physical universe. Okay, so that takes us through 7 emancipations. Then the 8th emancipation, this has a different character from the others. The base of neither perception nor non-perception. This is said to be the highest level of samadhi possible in the sphere or domain of concentration or unification of mind. And ontologically, these 4 formless meditations correspond to 4 realms of existence. So those who master these 4 formless meditations, if they still retain that mastery at the time they pass away, then they will be reborn in the plane of existence that corresponds to their level, their highest level of attainment. So if a meditator, say, masters the base of boundless space, but doesn't develop insight meditation, then when they pass away, they'll be reborn in the level of existence, the plane of existence called the base of boundless space. And similarly for the base of boundless consciousness, the base of nothingness, and the base of neither perception nor non-perception. That is the highest, the base of neither perception nor non-perception. That is the highest plane of existence within samsara, within the sphere of birth and death, within the sphere of conditioned existence. And so those are not in any way states of liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Okay, the attainment of cessation of perception and feeling, this is different from its predecessors in that this doesn't represent just one further level in the development of concentration. But it's said that this attainment is possible or accessible only to non-returners and arahants who have also mastered the preceding 8 meditative attainments. So, say an arahat who attains arhatship through the approach of dry insight without the jhanas is not able to attain this. An arahat who masters the 4 jhanas but not the formless attainments is not able to attain this. But only non-returners, anagamis, and arahats who have mastered the 8 attainments of samadhi are able to attain the base or the cessation of perception and feeling. So the way this is attained, first the meditator who wants to attain this will enter the first jhana and then emerge from it. Then the meditator will contemplate the states or mental factors in the first jhana as being anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanent, bound up, or unsatisfactory, and non-self. Then the meditator will go to the second jhana, enter it, emerge, contemplate it, the factors, impermanent, dukkha, non-self. And so going through each of the other attainments through the base of nothingness, entering it, coming out, then contemplating impermanent, dukkha, non-self. Okay, then they form the resolution that they want to enter the base of neither perception nor non-perception. And they have to resolve on the time in which they want to stay in that state. Say they want to stay in that state for a half an hour or an hour or a day. And then there are certain other determinations or resolutions that they have to make in advance. Okay, then they enter into the base of neither perception nor non-perception, and the mind stays in that state for a few seconds, and then consciousness comes to an end, perception and feeling come to an end, and they're in a state in which there's no perception and feeling or any other mental functions. But then by the force of their original determination to emerge from it, exactly when that time comes around, just like when I set this for a meditation of 45 minutes, exactly when the second hand goes down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, beep, beep, without fail, unless the battery is run. Then the meditator, when that allotted time has come, they'll emerge out of the attainment of cessation. Okay, so those are the 8 emancipations. And these as a group, they're called the 8 bases of mastery. And I will let you read the text. Maybe you just take one, okay. Because I have to say they're very obscure, even to me. I don't want to say even to me like I'm some, like I'm a, like a non-returner or something like that, but even I. Okay, so percipient of forms internally, one sees forms externally, limited, beautiful or ugly, and having overcome them, one is percipient thus, I know, I see. Okay, so in the first one, the forms can be either internal, it seems percipient of forms internally, but one sees forms externally. Again, that's obscure to me. But the deciding factor is that the forms here are limited, and they can be beautiful or ugly. And it's on this basis, apparently, that one enters into the absorption, into the jhana. In the second case, one sees the forms externally, but the forms here are measureless, but beautiful or ugly. In the third case, one is not percipient of forms internally, but one sees forms externally. They're limited, beautiful, or ugly. And then having overcome them, one perceives, I know, I see. The fourth one, again, one is not percipient of forms internally, one sees forms externally, but they're measureless. Okay, in this case, the next four, one is not percipient of forms internally. In each case, one is percipient of forms externally, and they differ just as far as the color goes, whether it's blue, yellow, red, or white, and the forms are described as blue, for example, blue in color, blue in hue with a blue tint. So this seems to be corresponding to the way I see it. These four bases of mastery corresponding to the third emancipation, one is focused only on the beautiful. Okay, please don't ask me detailed practical questions on this set. Okay, if we have some questions, I'll try to take them. Yeah, Matt, it's you.
The term having overcome them, can you sort of amplify what that is?
I think what this means, and I'm just sort of conjecturing, is that by what's meant here by overcome is that one attains the jhana based upon that particular object. Again, that's just my conjecture as to the meaning. And then what the commentary says, it says that when one is in the jhanic attainment, one is not actually mentally thinking, I know, I see, but it's rather when one has emerged from the jhana, then one realizes that one had that experience within the jhana. And so it's a kind of retroflective, reflecting back on the jhanic experience by, this is what I knew, this is what I saw. Okay, any other questions? Okay, Yoro? Dina, plus.
Bande, could you explain again how one exits the cessation of perception
And feeling? Before one does the preliminary work to enter that attainment, one makes a determination that I'm going to stay in the attainment for this particular duration of time. And then it's through the force of that previous determination that when that length of time has elapsed, the mind will emerge from that attainment. We can say that the stream of mind revives or comes back.
Is that attainment itself also, or corresponds to an existence?
To a plane of existence?
A plane.
No.
So it...
No, it's because the other attainments are generating karma, which has the force or momentum to bring the rebirth corresponding to that attainment. But in the attainment of cessation, there's no creation of karma.
So it's only a concentration, a state of absorption then?
we could call it a state of absorption. Technically, within the Theravada Abhidharma system, it's not called a samadhi, because samadhi implies the presence of the mental factor of one-pointedness of mind. And within this attainment, there's not even one-pointedness of mind. The mind is not focused on anything. In fact, the mind is not even occurring. The mind is actually cut off. It's ceased temporarily.
So for Arhan who has entered and exit the ninth state, the Arhan then lives a normal existence?
The Arhat what?
The Arhan goes on the normal existence. I would believe in the existence of neither perception nor non-perception. Does it revert back to the eighth state of existence?
You mean in emerging from this?
After emerging from the cessation.
If I remember, I'd have to check on this. If I remember, when one emerges from the attainment of cessation, what arises first is the fruition consciousness corresponding to the level of attainment of the meditator. So if it's an anagami, a non-returner who's entered into cessation, immediately when that cessation comes to an end, what arises first will be the fruition of non-return. If it's an arhat who's emerging, what arises is the fruition of arhatship as just a state of consciousness that runs a few turns. Then I think comes the fall into the bhavanga, the stream of consciousness. And then there comes the arising into what we would call normal consciousness.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so we've left this very rarefied atmosphere and we're coming back down. Next time we could perhaps we could finish the ones next time. Yeah, please.
Bhante, there's just one thing I'd like to say, which is to tell everybody about your wonderful new book, the Sutta-nipāta, which
okay.
I urge everybody to get because it's really a wonderful read.
Oh, is it?
And a remarkable scholarship, so I want to thank you very much for it and your work.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yeah, today we won't be able to have a Q&A session, and there won't, the dining hall won't be available to the students in this class at 11:30 because there's a Chan-style meditation retreat going on in the Kuan Yin hall, and the dining hall is reserved for those people on the retreat now. And then this afternoon I have to go into New York City for some other activity. You have another question? Okay, then just take the microphone.
Is it correct to say that the real difference between the acquired sign and the counterpart sign is the power of the sign?
The vividness, the vividness of it.
And the how the counterpart is pervasive. Is that the only difference between the two, but they're actually the same thing?
The counterpart sign initially is not pervasive. It can be extended until it becomes pervasive. But initially, it will be like the same size as the acquired sign. So it will be perceived maybe just as a little spot, a little ball, or maybe a bigger ball. But originally it's finite and limited, but then it takes it's part of the process of mental mastery to extend the sign till it becomes more and more, till it becomes expanded further and further, and then it becomes finally all extensive.
Thank you.
Okay, so let us end with the sharing of the merits. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanang. Akasata chabumata deva naga mahidika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe devanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhutanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavatacham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe satanumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Pavagopadaya vichihetato etantare satakayupapanna rupya rupicha sanya sanino dukkha pamuchantu posantu nibuting. Okay, one thing, actually two things I want to mention that I don't see except for Alice and any Connecticut people here.